This video will contain spoilers for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. If you are yet to play it, then please don't watch this video unless you really don't care, but at least you've been warned. I've got a lot of time for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I believe it's genuinely good for Assassin's Creed, but it doesn't come without its issues, and in my review I went over all the positives and all the negatives that I found when playing this game. But I thought I'd dedicate a proper video to talking about one of the bigger issues that I found while playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, something that I feel needs to be addressed, and ironed out as a point in the critique piece rather than getting lost in some review. It's not something that really occurred to me while I was playing the game, but rather after I finished it. It was something that the game made me want but didn't necessarily deliver on, and that is, oddly enough, being an assassin in Assassin's Creed. A response to this immediately will be, yes, but you basically function as an assassin in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and you're not wrong there, but that doesn't really cover what it means to be an assassin in this universe. Don't take this point the other way either. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is an Assassin's Creed game. It presents Assassin's Creed elements, such as deeply thought through assassin lore, little goodies to find in the modern day, the return of social stealth, kill room confessions, mysteries left behind by the Isu, and yet despite all that it still feels like some kind of afterthought in an epic Viking fantasy. Yes, it's Assassin's Creed relevant and arguably drives the entire plot of every game so far into one focal point that goes forward. Regardless of how utterly ridiculous the ending was, it does have the potential to do that. Not that I'm especially optimistic about it, but it's clear from the writing perspective that Assassin's Creed Valhalla does respect the franchise that it's in. And I'm not going to attempt to argue otherwise because that's not the point of this video. In all the god knows how many hours it actually took for me to play through this game, my favourite parts were the parts that felt more in touch with being an assassin. The London, Jorvik and Winchester arcs are the best parts of the game, and it's good fun finding the Hidden One's bureaus and learning little snippets of assassin lore. Being introduced to the social stealth system by Basim, though I can't find any part of the game where it actually felt useful. Maybe that's due to my own impatient playstyle, but often I just didn't find it to be particularly viable. Being taught the leap of faith by Hytham was awesome. I loved having the hidden blade back, and I loved having the option to turn on instant kills. The presence of an Assassin Brotherhood in this game is a huge step up from Odyssey, which had fuck all. And hunting down the Order of Ancients was good fun, though this system would have been launched into the stratosphere were it the game's primary focus. And then you've got Vinland, which is pretty ace as well. But all of that, though it does sound like a lot from what I've listed, only makes up a fraction of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. You spend the majority of the plot going around as Eivor doing Viking shit. I'm not adverse to doing Viking stuff, but it's pretty obvious that Eivor is a Viking. The only reason we ever do any assassin-focused stuff is because the Hidden Ones and the Raven clan have mutual interests. Sigurd wants to conquer England, and the Hidden Ones want to rid England of the Order of Ancients. And the Order of Ancients have a lot of power and control over England. Initially, this introductory function works. It's logical. It makes sense as to why it would draw these different types of people together. But over the course of the plot, it doesn't feel like we're drawn closer to the Hidden Ones at all. The Hidden Ones lore we learn doesn't pick up the pace in the latter stages of the plot. If anything, it actually slows down. At the start of the game, we get plenty of information to go by to begin with, and as we explore the world, use the Hidden Ones bureaus, we find more information and learn a lot about the Order of Ancients and their extent of control over England. But with the Hidden Ones themselves, the information flow just sort of fizzes out. The reason for this is the plot lacks a present Hidden One who actively embodies the creed consistently before you. There are two Hidden Ones present in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Basim and Hytham. Let's begin with Hytham. Pretty early in the story, Hytham is injured pretty badly by Kjotve. At least that's what we're told, so basically he becomes a benchwarmer manning the Hidden One's bureau in Ravensthorpe. He does give us some valuable Hidden One's insight, but for the most part of the story, he's pretty hands-off, quickly becoming more of a fixture in your settlement rather than an actual example of a Hidden One. And then you've got Basim, who's certainly more involved in the overall plot of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. At first he comes across as a mentor-like figure, but it's pretty obvious pretty quickly that he's got his own story going on, and that mostly happens off-screen. Now, there's enough on-screen for it to make sense, but there's not enough on-screen for you to have that vital context and understanding of what's going on. You see how it happens, but as a result, there's no remaining constant within the Hidden Ones that would help build an Assassin's Creed-focused character development. Basim detaches himself from the persona of a Hidden One as he becomes more like Loki, the Isu that he is a sage of. And so now we become detached from the creed because our only present hidden one really becomes Hytham, who by this point has been relegated to little more than a basic quest giver. I don't feel like Eivor's own character development properly complements this type of dynamic. Eivor's development is weird. In the eyes of other characters, Eivor changes, going from a glory-thirsty Viking to a more measured, patient and precise character. From where we're sitting, however, Eivor doesn't really change much at all. She is just the character that she's been from the start. There is an attempt at development that is mostly lost on me because it seems to be founded in a couple of nonsensical critiques from a character that Eivor later agrees with. But I wouldn't say that Eivor's character actually really changes much. Eivor is relatively but not completely open-minded to the concept of the hidden ones from the beginning, and yet she's kept out of the understanding by Sigurd and Basim at key moments to prevent us from learning more about the hidden ones and what Basim wants. The latter aspect of that point does make sense in how it's delivered because Basim is actually playing his own game. But surely the Brotherhood having Eivor hunt down the Order of Ancients on their behalf calls for more information than what's given. All I'm saying is it doesn't seem like the story is designed to make Eivor come across as a potential recruit for the hidden ones. And yet they give her the blade, they give her the skills and say, kill these people for us. And so the hidden one input as well is stunted because they're not actually that useful. That being said, somehow Eivor does have a good moment of character development at the end, whereby now it's clear that she is a sage of Odin. Odin seemingly attempts to take control in a similar sense to how I'd imagine Basim became twisted by Loki, but Eivor rejects Odin by having us think outside the box and unequip the axe to remove Odin's control. In this moment, Odin offers Eivor everything a Viking would want: wisdom, glory and power, asking what more would she need. The response simply is everything else, indicating that her original Norse beliefs are no longer important to Eivor, as we know that from where she's buried in the modern day that she is coming to understand her greater importance here and her duty to the living, as opposed to being consumed by the general consensus death wish of your typical Viking. And yet when you finish tracking down the Order of Ancients and return the last Order medallions to Hytham, he offers Eivor a place in the Hidden Ones, and Eivor refuses, stating that there's not enough glory in that. However, surely that doesn't matter anymore to Eivor. I feel like the main story plot direction of Assassin's Creed Valhalla isn't really going towards Eivor becoming a hidden one, necessarily, but this active rejection didn't seem to make much sense, at least not for the reason given. And this is a weird thing because I feel like Eivor will eventually come to join the hidden ones, maybe in one of the DLCs. It just feels like the reason for this was to drag the game out. The story doesn't really end, it just sort of stops. It fizzes out almost. You have a conclusion to the Order of Ancients aspect, you have a conclusion to the modern day aspect, you have a conclusion to the conquering of England. But it doesn't feel like an end. I think this story is going to carry into the DLC. And if that's the case, we'll have to pay more than the shelf price of an Assassin's Creed game to get Assassin's Creed satisfaction. And even then, God knows what will actually be done. Like I said, there are plenty of Assassin's Creed elements in Valhalla for you to feel like it has a place in the universe. It's satisfying in the moment, but that satisfaction isn't sustaining because you want that to go somewhere, you want it to mean something. It all quickly gets lost in the endless sagas of Viking bollocks that you find yourself doing in the game. Yes, often you'll find yourself functioning as what is essentially an assassin, but you know you're not an assassin, you're a Viking, and you're doing vaguely Hidden Ones related things, and you just don't get the perspective. But there's no evolution like maybe you saw in Black Flag. Sure, Black Flag had its issues, but it does give you a better idea of the direction than we see in Valhalla. We start off playing as a pirate. Edward comes into contact and eventually becomes allies with the assassins and comes to understand the creed, eventually seeing its importance over his own pirate ambitions. It isn't the same story, nor is it really trying to be, but there's a clear evolution of perspective. It's a little bit harder to have that evolution of perspective in Valhalla when it both changes and doesn't. And by that I mean it changes between Viking and less zealous Viking, I guess, which is a tad irritating when I feel as if this game did have the potential for that perspective to shift into a hidden one mentality. Maybe the DLC will complete this story and give us that, and then this won't be an issue, but it will become an issue of business practice, but that's a different video. But maybe this entire issue isn't really to do with that narrative development with Valhalla at all, but rather a simple question. When are we just going to be playing as an assassin again? The setting of each individual Assassin's Creed game has become its main selling point. It's no longer about being an assassin in this setting, it's about being a character in this setting, exploring the history first. As a result of this, we're seeing more frequent outsider stories. The last Assassin's Creed game in which we were an assassin in a historical period, which just happened to be where this story was set, was Syndicate. In fact, technically the last Assassin's Creed game in which we're actually an assassin is also Syndicate. In Assassin's Creed Origins, we play as a Medjay who forms what becomes a proto-brotherhood, the beginnings of the Hidden Ones. They're not quite assassins, they're not there yet, we don't see them get there, we just see them start to develop. Odyssey frankly has no right to bear the Assassin's Creed title. And then in Valhalla you're a Viking and you remain that outsider with Hidden One interactions, granted, but you're just still an outsider. And in all three of these games you wind up exploring more of the historical setting and your place in that, rather than what the more traditional Assassin's Creed games did. They didn't rely too much on the historical setting. It was all about finding a period with change going on and posing the question, what else could have been going on here? And while the story does address the history of what's going on, what made these stories work for Assassin's Creed was not getting too caught up with that, so we could explore in detail what could have happened secretly but running in parallel. So when I said earlier this Order of Ancient system could have been launched into the stratosphere were it the game's primary focus, this is what I meant. Being an outsider to the Brotherhood over the course of a story means you have to explore that historical aspect more. Because Eivor is more familiar with, say, that than being a Hidden One, because Eivor is not a Hidden One. Black Flag does a similar thing to begin with, but the similarities quickly end with Edward developing as a character to really get involved in the Assassin-Templar conflict that's going on behind the scenes, if you will. In Valhalla, you don't play as an outsider to the Brotherhood finding a way in, you just play as an outsider, and that seems to be the bottom line, at least for the main story. But a recurring theme in these newer Assassin's Creed seems to be that you don't play as an actual assassin. There's always a catch, and to a lot of people, that is going to get tiresome. Take for example Tyler, you may know him as Dynamite or one of the Four Pillars. Stand-up guy, there'll be a link to his channel in the description, you can check it out and show him some love. When he finished the game, he said to me that he wasn't really too keen, or at least that's how it came across, but on a lot of points we actually kind of agreed, and yet I liked the game and he seemingly didn't. The reason being, he went into this game wanting to be an assassin, wanting to explore the Brotherhood and explore the Order of Ancients, and see that story take a more primary focus than it did. And rightfully so, as this is Assassin's Creed. Whereas I wanted to see Assassin's Creed Valhalla at the very least salvage the overarching narrative that hasn't been at its best recently, and just get back on track. And I think that's something that this game does quite well. A rebuttal argument to us not being an assassin in this game is, well, you essentially function as one. But there's a difference between assassinating people and being a member of the Brotherhood, being a Hidden One, being an assassin. Ticking off targets on a list is all well and good, but what's missing here is that feeling of really being a part of this secret fight. Exploring what it means to be an assassin and what that means to our protagonist. Coming to understand the true meaning of the creed from another perspective, and all the perks and flaws that come with that. The sense of mystery that comes from the concept of working in the dark to serve the light. Seeing both the intended and unintended impact of the Brotherhood's actions, both on the fictional and historical aspects. Keeping a plot relevant to an overarching narrative is certainly one thing, but I feel as if that plot needs to embody Assassin's Creed as much as possible. Sure, it can be an RPG in which you can participate in massive Viking raids, get plenty of loot, get attacked by wolves every 5 seconds while exploring, because that's apparently the only kind of aggressive fauna that any RPG developer can think of, and explore fantasy segments if that's what you want, but that stuff shouldn't really be taking priority over being an assassin in Assassin's Creed. Realistically, it's only a piece of a grander puzzle that's missing here, but it is a big piece. So I understand the disappointment in certain people who feel as if the Brotherhood gets lost in everything else this game has, and I do feel it a little bit myself, and maybe the DLC will rectify this entirely. But for a franchise infamous for taking plot points and then either not concluding them or concluding them in comic books that nobody's going to read, I feel like we can all afford to be a little bit skeptical. People will look at this video and see the rant of an Assassin's Creed purist, and if that's what you want to take away from this, then fair enough. But I don't disagree that the old Assassin's Creed formula needed a change, but that doesn't mean that it needed any change. If anything, I feel like Valhalla puts the franchise back on track to being better in future installments. I don't know if it's easing out of the RPG formula, but it's certainly easing back in to re-embracing the values that initially built this franchise. I wouldn't call this game necessarily a return to form, but whether or not it's ultimately positive for Assassin's Creed as a franchise depends entirely on what comes next. This story doesn't feel concluded. I'm sure the DLC will see to finishing that off. Hopefully Eivor will join the Brotherhood and then we'll get get to explore an assassin character, which is a big missing part of Valhalla. They set up the birth of a new order rising from the ashes of the Order of Ancients, presumably the Templars, and maybe that'll drive Eivor forward into joining the Hidden Ones. But for that, I suppose we'll just have to wait and see. And that concludes this little ramble about something that I felt was important to address. Do you feel differently? Do you feel the same? Do you have any extra points that you'd like to add? That's what the comment section's there for, feel free to use it. All I ask is that we keep it respectful, let's avoid a tirade of abuse because they're never fun. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff, that would be fantastic. And with any luck I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, take care and goodbye.